Wow, this camera is terrible. Let's get a nice recording here and let me talk about some things with you. Um, I've been watching these videos about manhood and the issues that are plaguing America right now. It's 2022, so in the last, 5 years, I've begun to notice a huge difference in the types of interactions that are taking place between disagreeing parties in the political circle. People who are on, like, influence positions on the internet, like Facebook, like famous people, Hollywood actors. The guy could sign up today and then tomorrow he'll have millions of people, right? Because he's an actor and he's well known. So they'll be following him and he can say something and have a huge amount of influence. Um, and they've been noticed as being very influential in politics. It's not just Hollywood actors, of course. Obviously, they generally side with the left, but you have other groups, the other individuals, I mean to say, who 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 have influence in the world, who are speaking their minds and are being silenced and being attacked. Right now, the example that is on my mind is Andrew Tate, who is a wealthy, I guess he's a champion kickboxer, and I suppose he's a very very dominant fighter. So he got to a position where he could say, anything he wanted, and people would be listening, and because of his success and because of his wealth and all that. And I started seeing Andrew Tate last year sometime on my phone on YouTube, things that he was saying, and stuff like that. And gradually, I haven't really listened to him more and more, but if it gets suggested and it seems interesting, I'd click on it. And he says some very, very, very true observations about how the world doesn't cater to men, but you have to thrive. You have to, find success on your own terms, basically, and how women are catered to now, and how a woman's place is in the home. He talks about women actually want a man to dominate them and be their leader and be their authority, but that's like their desire for good. And so, like all of us, we have a desire for good, desire for bad, and women's desire for bad makes them go in and do things like take nudie pictures for the internet, or um, just go out with too many guys, or whatever, and then they decide they don't want to get married because they'd rather be out doing the profession. Andrew Tate makes these comments about women being in the home, basically, or women should be having babies and settling down and getting married. And his influence is strong with young men, it seems like, because he acknowledges them and their need for strong masculine leadership. I'm sure there's been some conversation in his videos about how, um, uh, like in communities where there's no father in the home, boys will go to things like gangs as a way of getting their masculine leadership that they need to develop their manhood properly. And of course, they develop wrong because they're criminals and they're getting influenced by criminals. But that need for wildness is there. And so I have a couple thoughts, and I've already obviously been sharing my opinion as I go here. But um, you know, one of my thoughts is that, well, let's see. Let me just organize my thoughts. Um, yes. So, the first important thing that I want to say is that boys do have a need, a biological imperative to procreate. It's sort of an awakening pressure in their life as a teenager when they hit puberty, and begins to push them forward hard to accomplish what their destiny will be. And for me, uh, you know, purity was always just sort of something that I inherited. I grew up in a home where purity was the thing to do. We didn't have the opportunity to go out with girls and stuff, and so obviously, with that came the natural byproduct of purity. So the problem is that it wasn't ingrained in my beliefs. You know, I guess it was, but I had so many doubts about my belief system as a Christian, because as soon as I left home, what I thought would work fine, it worked fine my whole life, did not work anymore. I was in the army and I was struggling. There were people around me that were just, you know, basically they viewed maturity as being a person being as bad as they could possibly be and then coming back from it. That was how people viewed maturity. And so I knew that I hadn't really gone down that road, and I didn't want to, but gradually the pressure mounted and increased in my life in the military, and I gave up my purity to a woman of pretty much of no consequence in my life, and you know, moved forward from that and had a complete transformation in my thinking and my drive and my desire for life. Now, I will say I was very, very lost after my time overseas. I was surrounded by people who were just drinking and partying. The military doesn't really provide good, solid mentorship. Really, what all they do is just use and abuse you. They sort of beat you down, and that's how it was when I was in. That was, to give you a range of years. I guess I was 18, 2018 I joined, and I believe actually no, it was 2008. It's 2008. I joined the military. I did a tour in Afghanistan, and then 2010, I believe, is when I got out of the military. So I did get out early before my term of service was over. But basically, the time in the military was fraught with troubles and difficulties that I did not foresee, and it was an extreme immersion into that which the world believes, between um, the man's place in the world, what a man should be. Um, a lot of guys had a very ill-formed view of what a man should be. In their mind, it was a man is defined by his position in the violence hierarchy or the physical dominance hierarchy, which is like who's the best fighter, who's been in the most fights or whatever. And if it wasn't that, it was the popularity hierarchy, who's the most popular. The obvious hierarchy in the military of rank was just accepted. It was the most relevant hierarchy. And then within that, if I was surrounded by other people of the same rank as myself, then the hierarchy would be determined usually by popularity. And then the final layer of hierarchy was physical dominance hierarchy, if there was a conflict or something like that. But in the end, when men are dealing with each other, I feel like they typically, in the back of their mind, they have their last resort. What is their final force? What is their final lever that they'll use against another person? And so that is the sort of dominance hierarchy, I think, where a person knows, like, if even if a person is a higher rank than me or something, if I really want to, I can be physical with them. And I don't think that's super common. I don't think you even see that very much in the workforce in America, but people always know that in the back of their mind, especially if you view someone as your equal on any other terms, like if you're on the street, walking down the street, for example, or if you're in a crime area or in a drug exchange or purchase or anything like that. There's always a consideration of that dominance hierarchy. Who is the dominant character here in this situation? And so I was very much a stranger to any type of dominance hierarchies. I had no idea. Of course, I knew that submitting to my God-given authority was the intended result or outcome of my parents. But I had such a lack of exposure to the world that I had no concept of the type of forces that would be leveraged against me in my life as a man. The popularity thing was really, really tough to accept. I was different than other people, and they wouldn't accept me. And what's hilarious about that is how the whole mantra now in the world today is that diversity is what makes us stronger, and we should accept people that they're different than us and everything like that. And that just wasn't reality on the ground level. Men are not like that. Men don't subscribe to that, especially men in the lower caste. You got to remember, like, the type of men that are joining the military. I mean, there's some guys that are genuine patriots that truly want to serve their country, and then you have everybody else, the riffraff. And the genuine patriots do generally stick out. They do a very good job. I joined the military as a genuine patriot, but I also had a severe lack of the things that make a man. I had a lack of experience. I had a lack of personal strength. I had a lack of understanding on various issues like the dominance hierarchies. So the military was a tough place. It was a tough thing to cope with, and um, the majority of the guys that were around me were very worldly types. These were guys who, like, how many fights have you been in? How many girls have you slept with? How many states have you lived in? All that stuff. It was like, what have you seen this movie? Have you seen that movie? That was a very, very common conversation to be had when I first joined the military. And there was a fair number of younger guys in there, and some of the other guys that were like me, they kind of came from like the corners of the earth a little bit and didn't really know what was going on and just doing their best. And some of them didn't make it. A bunch of guys didn't make it actually, which is amazing because you almost don't have the option not to make it in the Army. But so moving forward, I wanted to sort of discuss a little bit about like a man's need. So yeah, so I did have like a lack of that which makes a man when I was 18, 17, which is when I joined as 17. So um, that is an important thing. I did have the existence of that biological imperative. Obviously, I had sex drive, and I had a general idea of what it was for, but was actually prior to losing my virginity. I feel like there was a very rigid concentration of my energy into those things that would matter in the world. And I think I kind of got lost in the rabbit hole with the military a little bit because I thought that I was going to make a contribution and that I would do well based on my efforts and upon my talents and my intelligence and all that. And I guess I would say I'm a fairly intelligent person. I'm articulate. I know how to use the language. Um, but being good at speaking, or writing, for example, isn't really the same as being good at interacting with your peers or even capturing the notice of your superiors. And when you also too with getting put under extreme stress, everyone responds differently under stress. And for me, test anxiety, my mother called it, but whenever I would know the answers, and then as soon as the test was in front of me, I couldn't remember them. And it's the same when someone would confront me. I don't know, and I would just yield to whatever they said instead of having an answer because all my thoughts would escape me, and I'll just be encapsulated by the present moment, this face that's in my face that's basically unsatisfied somehow. And so I yield to that because that's what I learned as a child was that my mother and my father confronted me, it was just to yield and submit, and don't worry about the fact of whether you know what they're trying to ask you or whether you have a rebuttal that makes sense or anything like that. Those things are all very important elements of manhood, but those are pre-canned, and those are things that you store up in your life over time, over through experiences. So if I meet people, I meet people, 100 people, right? So each time I meet a person, I begin to gain a greater understanding of the types of questions that are likely to be asked. Being able to predict the things that people are going to say or do is part of developing that pre-canned response that you would need to have in that given situation. For a lot of people, like I said, resorting to violence is that pre-canned response that they can always go to if none of their other responses seem to work. And that's where you get like violence. Violence is actually just an act of a sort of a shallow mind or an incapable mind in the end. But for someone who can't accomplish their ends some other way, let's see here. There we go. So the the understanding of manhood was, obviously missing. in my life, and so I proceeded forward with what seemed like I guess, the most certain course of action as far as becoming a man was, if I go overseas and kill somebody, then I'm dominant, and nobody can ever take that away from me. And obviously, that's not a good reason to join the military, and that wasn't my reason. I think I had genuine, true patriotic reasons, but in the back of my mind, I thought, um, some overseas combat experience will uh, definitely patch up my issues with myself, as far as my view of myself, my perspective on myself, is how it was shaped by people around me. The influence of people who constantly say, you're this or you're that or whatever. People's responses, especially a lot of people responding to me over time throughout that period, really made me think, if it was like a democratic vote and all these people got to vote and say what they thought I was, most people would vote and say I was a weak man, or I was an incapable man, or I had, if they had like a simple questionnaire with like three options or something to answer, it would be one of the lesser, it would be a weak response. It wouldn't be Ed is a strong man. It wouldn't be Ed is a good man. Ed is dominant. They would say Ed is weak. Basically, that would be the consensus with all the people that knew me. And so the view of the people that knew me was very important to me. And I was raised only exposed to those whose opinions would matter, basically. And so we learned not to really regard the opinion of other people outside the home, because, basically the other people that our family knew still didn't really believe exactly what we believed. And so their opinion didn't matter. And only my mom and dad and my brothers really mattered or whatever. So once I left, like I said, once I left home, um, the idea that I was going to continue thinking the same thing about myself was no longer an option. I had to acknowledge how other people saw me. It was not up for debate at that point in time, and so I began to think like the best thing was for me to get some hard road behind me. And obviously, the military is a hard road in its own way. I could have remained on track and lived a holy life throughout that time, but I did not. I went into behaviors like light drug use. I did drinking. I got involved with different girls during that time, and really began to have an extremely dissipated focus. And it's the minute that I guess I lost my virginity, I would say my focus was completely dissolved. I had no grasp on my vision, on my mission as a man. And to be truthful, I didn't really feel like I had that to begin with. There were no strong forces in my life that were really helping me concentrate that vision of myself. And even though I was trying to be in church, I was tithing. When I would remember, I would go back and like pay a bundle of cash at the church to tithe for all the money I had forgotten to tithe on. And so obviously that was always like, wow, I'm really trying here. I'm really trying to honor God and everything with my life. But yet I didn't get any respect for it whatsoever. And my parents were uninvolved. They were unavailable. They didn't answer the phone. Everything was always more important than me. And so basically I felt like I was all alone, completely alone in the world. And it seemed like having someone laying in the bed with me seemed like a feeling of not being alone. And then I also, along with that, I realized that um, one of the great keys, one of the great critical components of success in pursuing your vision is not being alone. It's having someone that's in your court, someone that's in your um, yeah, I guess that's what they say is in your corner, the phrase I'm looking for. So I was really, really devoted to trying to find someone that would be in my corner. And I thought that there she is right there in the corner of the screen. Say hi, Taylor. There she is. She's in my corner. So, but at the time, I didn't have anyone in my corner, and I thought that I would sort of foster a relationship with a person who would comfort me in my troubles. And I didn't understand the waiting period of what that would be like. And I, of course, like I said, I didn't really have a good comprehension of what it meant to be alone or how to use that alone time as a man to become better. I did strive to become as fit as possible. I exercised constantly. I went to the gym. I was I was, never any troubles whatsoever passing my PT test. And it was, it was my great pursuit, I would say, was my fitness. And what's really funny about that is that no matter how hard I worked, I was always small. My digestive system couldn't take all the protein supplements and stuff that other guys were taking, and I didn't gain muscle. I stayed the same. I was skinny and chiseled, but very skinny, low muscle mass, and I was strong for my weight, pound for pound. But of course, that means nothing when you're lightweight because, well, it starts to mean something when you're like moving weights that are like 3 times your body weight. I was never really at that point except for deadlift, but nonetheless, so back to the central thought here as far as a man stepping forward and or a boy, I would say, which is what I was, trying to become a man and what made me a man. um, the issue was that I translated my capability or my focus to succeed and to become something great in the world and influence the world. I translated that into basically a focus in, or I wouldn't say I transmuted it into a focus in getting a mate. How can I get a mate? If I just get a mate, I will be happy. If I just get a mate, I will succeed. And so I went after girls, and I was like, where are the girls? I'll go to the bar, and there's no girls here. I'll go to the club. There's no girls here. And the girls that were there were low quality women. They were with lots of guys. They weren't interested in me. They were older. There was always an issue. They weren't healthy. They weren't fit. They weren't attractive. And all it seemed like all the attractive women and fit women that I would ever see were always with a guy already. And at some point, I don't know when I realized this, but women don't spend any time alone. They go. You might hear women say that, but that doesn't isn't how it happens. How it happens is they say, "I'm going to be alone," and then they're with somebody the next day because they get lonely or they feel like they want someone to talk to, and there's some guy there that's in the lineup, waiting for his turn to be the boyfriend, and she's already got guys in mind that she can go to after she's done with this guy. And so, or the guys have her in mind, and so when she becomes available, they find out, and then boom, she's back involved with a man almost instantly. And obviously, I was never on somebody's lineup as far as their top choices for the next man they're going to be with, which is a great thing because if you think about it, they're running a dude carousel, and and I would just be like one of the turns on the carousel. It wouldn't even be like a real relationship. So those are things that I learned along the way. Um, but you know, I want to fast forward now to where I'm at today and what I feel like makes a man, because I'm concerned number one with suicide among boys. Um, I think girls, are probably declining in suicide rate. I'm not 100% sure. I know social media has had a huge impact on girls, but I'm a man. I don't know that much about what goes on inside of girls, especially teenage girls or, post-pubescent girls. So with boys, I know from my experience was, I needed someone that I would look up to as a man, and so like I look at myself now, and it's like, am I someone that people will look up to as a man? And it's kind of amusing, like who's gonna watch this video? Is it my son? Am I gonna make my son watch it, or is somebody gonna watch it voluntarily on the internet? So, so anyway, like, but what makes me a man now, or what makes me respect myself? Because really, it's less a relationship between what other people think of me and me than it is a relationship between what I think of myself and what I truly am, right? So obviously, you want to be aligned. You want to know your true self. Like, what is your true self? So I have been put to the test in single life. I've been put to the test in various ways as a man. I was an addict for a period of time, and then of course going into sobriety and working hard in the program to try to get these bad remnants of bad thinking addicts mind out of my life and be transformed more into the image of God and be rejuvenated spiritually, such that I have defenses against all the harmful temptations that are in the world. So it has more to do with overcoming the power of the flesh and allowing the Spirit to guide us than it does with just simply changing habit. But I went through all these things, and now I look back on my life as pretty much having begun with my marriage to Taylor. Um, I knew that when I wanted to get married when I was single and I hadn't yet found anyone sort of eligible. I knew that getting married was a very, 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 very important thing in my life. I didn't 100% know why, but I did know I needed someone to cuddle with at night. For some reason, I'm a cuddle bear. I love to cuddle and snuggle, and um, being physically close to somebody, it calms my spirit, it calms my nerves, and it makes me a satisfied and happy person. I do not know why. I felt like when I was a boy, when I was very little, my mother like kind of cut me off. No more cuddling. I wanted to cuddle, always wanted to cuddle. And I was the youngest, and I guess she just had work to do and she couldn't cuddle me constantly. So, now I'm married and I get that, and that really helps my well being a lot. I've actually heard about these people that are like professional cuddlers, and they literally, they're not dirty, they're not whores, they're cuddlers, and they get paid to cuddle with you, and they have certain boundaries, they have rules, they have amounts of time that you can purchase, and that is quite an amazing thought to me. um, Probably I would have benefited from a cuddle or two during that time of my life, but of course, who would have thought that such a thing would even exist? So anyway, um, and also too, in my mind, it would have been closely related with prostitution. It would be very hard for me to separate those things in my mind, even though now it really has become a very regulated industry. But um, you know, part of it is that. Part of it is just a sense of comfort in my life where I don't feel like I am alone. Laying in bed at night and wondering, am I going to be alone forever, is a serious, real question. Many people go their entire life being alone. And we see people, a lot of times, we see older people that are alone, and they die alone. And I think most of the time, these people have had a chance to not be alone, and something went wrong somehow. Something went wrong along the way. But for me, it was about not being alone in bed at night. I do not know why this has been such a major issue for me. It's been a huge issue since I was a little baby. I used to have nightmares that made me wake up and I would scream, but I wouldn't wake up, and I would just scream and scream and scream. And my mother would hold me and try to wake me up and slap me around and pull me out of the bed and pour water on me and stuff. And um, I still remember some of the nightmares I used to have. And just it's amazing, the idea of being alone, being so terrifying. Why was it so scary? Why was it so terrifying? I have no idea. But even when I was in the military, I was extremely alone. I could be in formation, but no one understood me. No one wanted to hear what I had to say. No one was influenced by me. Nobody cared about my opinion. So move forward now into my life. Now I'm not alone at night and sleeping in bed at night. And even though my wife might have to sit there and listen through my opinion and maybe not really care necessarily about all the depths that I go into in my diatribes, she will sit there and listen. But my children are people that I can teach and influence those truths which I have learned in my lifetime. And that is a really, really, really meaningful thing. And I finally, at this time in my life, begin to understand why, when they tell the story of, a man being forced to watch his family be executed, why that is such a torment to the man. Because that thing that he fostered in those children, which is so precious to him, is the prolonging or proliferating of those lessons which he has learned through the course of his life. Those lessons give a man's life meaning. And so, me being able to pass on the things which I have learned to my children, who will carry them on after I am gone, is a very, 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 very precious thing in my life. Children are stressful to deal with, and they're a lot of work, but that is a very, very important thing. And I think fatherhood has really helped me to realize so many of the things that were true. Um, you know, things that I possibly could have understood maybe as a boy, even. So, where was I? So, yeah, so the things that make me feel like a man or happy with myself are the type of man that I am. So, I'm not alone at night. I have someone to pass on my lessons, my life lessons to. Um, it's funny. Uh, I I could have probably had children at a younger age and still begun to have life lessons after I had my wife and children. But the single life lessons are the most painful ones. And I think it was an important period of time for developing a viewpoint of the world as it is for lonely people. There is a tremendous number of single and lonely people in the world. And this is not how it was meant to be. From the beginning, God made them man and woman, and He made them to be together. He didn't make us to be alone. So the children go from the shelter of the family, the togetherness of the mom and dad as a shelter for them, to and the confidence too that, by the way, that the mom and dad, with all their struggles and all their difficulties and their sin and their badness, uh, don't have to be alone, and neither do you, right? So growing up with the mom and dad, it was good. I had both parents because it gave me a better vision of that. But the single life outside of the home is quite a tough life as far as loneliness goes, and I think that probably applies to women as well as men in many cases. Um, but I digress. So the lessons, yeah, the lessons of loneliness, of course, were mandatory for me. I had to do those lessons to greatly appreciate the marriage that I have now. I felt like I was past my point of anguish as a teenager, um, past the point of utter loneliness, and I was ready. But I was not ready in many ways. I was not fully formed as a man. And even when I married my wife, I don't really think I was fully formed as a man either. But I had progressed in many ways through the the maturing process of addiction recovery. So there were some areas where I had grown tremendously in that period of time. The number one, I would say, most important element is it's the last element I'm going to mention to you about manhood. So because we talked about the imperative, procreation, the biological imperative of a man, right? That utter loneliness that a man would feel drives him to find a mate, which by biologically, that imperative basically is fulfilled in pregnancy, and then the children come out, and the children give you a chance to prolong your ideals, to teach on those lessons on to the next generation of the world, and that is the greatest impact on the world, is what your children will do when you are gone. You can do but a limited amount. You can only do but so much, but your children, there, first of all, there are more of them than there are of you. And if your ideas pass on and pass the test of life, which is your children try it and it works, then they can pass it on to their children too, and potentially have just a great flowering tree of wonderful people doing great things throughout the future of the world. So that's if you do well as a father. So you know, so at this point now, throughout all that, work was a requirement. It was a requirement for the single man who's alone. It was a requirement for the man who's married. It was a requirement for a father. So, supporting the family, obviously, and then work as a single man, I would say, is a formative experience because it puts you around other people who are contributors. Work is a contribution that you make to society. So it's a service that you provide to other human beings, essentially. And when a person begins to make contributions to people outside of the home, that is when they begin to feel a sense of worth. So my first job was I was at a grocery store and I was a bagger. That was as low as you could be on the totem pole. I never got promoted above a bagger for some reason. But I don't really think that counts as work. That's a job, but I don't know if that's really work. I think, from my perspective now, I think work is more like, plumbing, digging, tree trimming, um, other stuff. But, work ethic applies to everything that you do. I bagged groceries to the best of my ability. I'm still good at bagging groceries to this day. I really could go back in my mind and remember. I could really remember most of that stuff if I really try. Um, but you know, hmm, yeah, yeah. Work is a formative experience, but it's really, I think a man should really, instead of working in like a co-ed work environment where men are working with women, a man should really be working with other men. I mean, I don't think it's a problem for women necessarily to be involved in the work, but a boy should be working under a man, a male supervisor who can also take on a fatherly role in his life. It's much like the preacher of a church. Um, it's not that women can't be bosses or leaders, but I think for the purposes of a teenage boy who's seeking to become a man, there's a desperate need for the influence of a masculine figure, especially a respectable masculine figure. It's not common. Well, in my family, I will say that my mother talked down about my dad a lot, and so I didn't have the respect for him that I could have had. Um, I think his failings were present, throughout my life, and from my perspective, they were different failings than what my mother described them as. And so, of course, it compounded my negative view of my father. Between, I already had my own view, which is sort of part positive, part negative, maybe more negative than positive, but then add on the negative of what my mother said. Now he's just a bad guy. He's no good. He's this, he's that. He's not manly enough. He's not tough enough. He doesn't do enough stuff around the house. He's uh he's not strong-handed enough with. He's not involved. He doesn't get involved, mix it up with the boys like he should. Whatever. Like he doesn't. Why doesn't he take authority? Things like that. So it's like, so that was my perspective of my dad. But it would have been good for me to have a man that I could genuinely look up to and realize that work is a fulfilling of your purpose. Um, in the military, like I said, most of the guys sort of viewed manhood as being like who's got the biggest guns, who's got the big arms, who can beat the next guy in a fist fight, or who knows how to use their popularity as a weapon and dominate other individuals, and or achieve sort of a level of happiness based on people's opinion of them, right? So, something that I learned about work is that your boss might not appreciate your hard work. Um, they might despise you even though you're a high performer at work. A boy desperately needs to feel like the people he's working for need him and that they benefit from him doing well. And so I have sought to try to provide that for teenage boys that live near us. And it seems like most boys, most young men are more interested in an easy path to getting what they want rather than actually fulfilling the path of manhood. And it could be that they just haven't tasted of that fruit. The fruit of your labor would be reputation. When I have like my personal business, I have the capability of gaining reputation by having my business perform well and having happy customers. But as a teenager bagging groceries, I did not. So I think every boy should do manual labor. I've definitely known other men, especially in ministry men, church men like pastors and so forth, evangelists. They'll say, back when I was younger, I did, I was an apprentice to a bricklayer. I was digging potatoes, or I was working construction on the side, to help pay for my college or whatever. You'll hear that a lot, and these are well-formed men that I'm talking about. So they've done manual labor, and I think there's a great virtue to it. You do have like a physical need to express value. Prior to sex, a man has to be able to use his body to provide force, uh, the constructive force in the world, whether it be carrying things that are heavy, or accomplishing physical work, and sort of developing a perspective on that, and seeing, oh, this is a thing that is satisfying. This is a thing that I can be proud of, that I can see for years to come. This is a thing that will be here long after I am gone. It's a little touch of you in the world, right? You leave your fingerprints wherever you go, and doing manual labor is a very important element of growing up. I think about societies and groups of people. I might get off track a little bit bringing these things up, but you look at like the Amish community, where it's blue collar, everything is labor, and I'm sure everything is not labor, but labor is very important to these people, to these communities. They make it a critical part of their life. It's so prevalent. It's so important that it's not even considered whether you'll do work with your hands. It's just what kind of work will you do. And I think great lessons are learned through that sort of channel of your energy. I'm not saying that everyone has to be a blue collar laborer by any stretch, but I do think that it's a very, very positive place for a boy to be. I think blue collar working men tend to learn a lot of valuable lessons in the progress of their career and their trade, between interacting and selling jobs, interacting with many customers, understanding price structures, market, understanding how to keeping relationships, courtesy, how to express courtesy to others, um, how to get past seemingly impassable hurdles, struggles, broken down vehicle or what have you, different things that can happen that will set you back badly in your career. So a boy working under someone like that will get to see the practical side of survival in the world. The world is not so easy as just simply graduate high school, go to college, get the plush job you always wanted, and then hook up with all the girls you want or whatever. It's not really like that. It's more along the lines of facing disappointment each step of the way, and discovering that things that you did were essentially a waste of time. They were only a waste of time in so much as you learned nothing from them, of course. So if you learn from something, then it wasn't a waste of time. And then some of those lessons are very expensive, and they take a very long time to be learned. For me, one of my great lessons was about addiction. But my addiction life also got me in the path of many, many people in the lower crust of society. You could call it the dregs of society, where the greatest struggle is taking place, where crime is taking place, where the worst types of sins are taking place. Basically, the problem people of society, and being around those kinds of individuals and knowing more about their backgrounds. And so I did learn something from that, even though it was a very sideways sort of experience as far as learning about that. I could have probably learned about that in a different way that would have been less destructive in my own life. But I did learn during that time. So God used that mistake. And so, working in the trades for a boy, I think, builds a manhood. I think learning how to fight is something, often done, especially in families who have money. Those who seem to be more wealthy tend to say, "Oh, what can I do to help my child's development? My child has no character. My child, you know, who can they be influenced by that will make them a better person?" And jujitsu, wrestling, football coaches, wrestling coaches, different sports, all that stuff is very good. Weightlifting in football, obviously, a lot of people who do football also end up doing weightlifting, and that's kind of like what the physically talented individuals gravitate towards. And I focused on building strength, and I did it in a different way than everyone around me, so I was all by myself. But if I had had, a strength coach or something like that when I was a kid, I think that would have been a good influence. But The important thing was the pursuit and the exercise of a particular physical discipline. Uh, gaining physical discipline, I think, especially for a boy beginning to find strength and muscle and everything like that in his body, is a very important developmental hurdle. Uh, it, Sometimes I feel like it's better to do something alone, and sometimes I think it's better to do it with other people. So it does depend on the situation. In my situation, I did not have a choice of doing it with other people. There were different rules in my home. My mother wouldn't allow me to get a gym membership. I didn't have money for it anyway, but I did have some weights at home that I worked out with and learned some stuff that way. Um, Physical exercise does help form the physical body that you will spend the rest of your time in. And obviously, you can always make changes and always make it better. There's never a time when you have no say in what your body is like, even to the point of not eating. You could literally not eat for a month, month and a half, and continue to be alive. It could be a great struggle during that time, but there's many things that you could do. You could exercise daily. You could go for long walks. Um, but as far as manhood, expressing strength, lifting weights is a great way to do that. And of course, the Army, there's a culture of fitness. And so I was able to be around a lot of guys who thought it was cool to be strong. Most of them thought getting bigger was the goal. And so I didn't care about that at one bit. And at one time, I did work on trying to get bigger, and my digestive system just couldn't take it. Um, just consuming so much food. People say you got to eat big to get big, and my body just wasn't having it. It was too much discomfort and pain already in the muscle fibers, and on top of that, having pain in my stomach from eating, these things that were supposed to make me get bigger. I just didn't. I didn't have the guts for it, basically, literally. So, um, but that is a great pursuit for a guy, for a man to have, and that will get you much closer to being the man that you ought to be. Um, and also too, if you're expecting to end up with a woman who is somewhat attractive, you're going to find it very difficult to accomplish if you haven't done well with the genetic material that God gave you. So, making the best of that is very important. Also, um, you know, you can develop more over time than you can all at once most of the time. Boys and young teenagers can make great progress if they have good genetics, but for me it was a matter of extensive practice over time. And I think really what that prepared me for was a lifetime of manual labor that I'm in the middle of now. And I don't mind being physical and lifting heavy stuff. I can do it. I have strength. It's the type of strength I can actually use for something instead of just show strength. And so in my mind, it was a success. I felt like maybe my mind was a little bit in the wrong place when I was doing it. I didn't really know why I was doing it, but I suppose facing the challenge and trying to make improvements upon myself was the major factor there. And I never got up higher in the dominance hierarchy as far as strength. I was always. It didn't matter how much I trained. It seemed like I just didn't have the material to be stronger than the other guys. I'm stronger than a lot of people now as a 32-year-old person, but as a younger guy, it seemed like all the guys at the gym were just naturally stronger dudes to begin with, and they were building on a better platform than I started with. That is my best guess. Maybe they all knew way more than me, but something tells me that that is not the case. So, those are some of my initial thoughts on the progress of manhood and what I've learned about it. And I hope this video is a help to you. I plan on doing others also. Um, if it's on the internet, I hope it's not banned. Probably I'm likely to say something that will get me banned from the internet, but nonetheless, there it is. So thanks for watching. If you are my child, I hope that you will take these lessons to heart and be saved from some of the pain that I've endured and try to be a good man. All right, so good luck out there.